Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Rich, and I am the host of the Champions Corner. I'm so happy to have with us today Camica Credle. Camica is a speaker, a trainer, an educator, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other wonderful things. So, with that, Camica, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Josh, for having me. I'm excited, very excited to be here. Thank you again for the invitation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I was just talking about how you're a speaker, trainer, and an educator. Talk to us a little bit, Kamika, about your background. How did you get to where you are today?
What great, honestly, it's by the grace of God, to be honest with you, first
Hmm.
and foremost. But I think it really started with my upbringing, with my parents just instilling, values and beliefs, to just put your mind to anything, you will achieve anything. So I went to college, the first, I guess, individual in my immediate family to graduate from college.
Okay.
So I went to go get two master's degrees, one in human services, um, life coaching, and the other one in management. And then also, I have a certification program with the John Maxwell team. And more so, I just wanted to elevate my own skill set and my mindset. So I know that the tools that I have, I'll be able to execute in the community and different organizations. But my journey has been awesome. I would not trade anything. It's a lot of failures, a lot of lessons learned, but I believe we all learn in those failures as to what worked, what doesn't work. And then also, my grandmother always used to tell me, you want to make sure that you help others along the way in any form of fashion and what that looks like, because what you have, somebody else may need. So I make sure I live that out every day.
Wow. Okay. A lot of wisdom in what it is that Grandma is saying. There. So, you talked about quite a bit. You highlighted values. You talked about being the first to graduate from college in your immediate family. If you don't mind, I just wanted to just park there for a second. Uh, Talk to me a little bit about that experience, being the first to actually graduate. Um, in retrospect, what
Yes,
does that mean to you?
yes. Just thinking back on that aspect, I've always, looked to my father for his wisdom, and he always told me, "Don't do the things that I did," and I
Mhm.
did things out of fear, or I did things out of the aspect of say they may not happen for me at that time frame. And so with my mother, like she said, she just made sacrifices. And at that time, was it an opportunity to go to college? And it wasn't.
Mhm.
So with me, they just more so to say, don't do the things that we did. Learn from our mistakes. And
Right.
that's one thing that I did do. And then also I have a younger brother. We're 14 years apart. So when he was coming along, I was in high school. So I had to still be that example for him. And he always looked up to me. So I had to make sure that it's not about us. It's about my other family members. It's like my other cousins. They went off to college as well, doing very, very great in their profession. But I think you always got eyes and ears watching you. So you
Yeah.
got to make sure that you are being a positive example for them. And I thank my parents for their wisdom to say, okay, Kamika, we have a plan in place for you. Maybe don't go our direction, but do better than what we did, and
Hmm.
making them proud. And so that's why I kind of went above and beyond to get the degrees, because I knew what I wanted to do in the future. When you get a glimpse of what your vision is and your future is, and it's helping other people and serving people, I had to make sure that I had the education behind it and experience to do that.
So I'm just going to add, aside from being a speaker, trainer, educator, I'm gonna put trailblazer there because
Thank
you know,
you.
I
Thank
hear
you.
that. I hear that, and that's so important. I think that for any family, especially when we're talking generations, I think the goal is that the next generation is going to be able to get further along than what it is that they were able to in their generation, right? And
Absolutely.
so that is a team effort, in that sense. And I hear that in your story for sure.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
And I would also add that you talked about having a younger brother that was
Mhm.
14 years younger than you.
Yes.
So I'm the youngest, and oh my goodness,
Oh,
how people treat the youngest sometimes. But that's a whole different thing. But what I would say is, what I would say is that my brothers are 11
mhm.
and 12 years older than me, and
Okay.
so I remember watching them in high school. when I was first starting to really conceptualize what school meant. And so you're right, seeing those examples one way or the other, that does impact the younger siblings. And certainly in my case, that was a big part of, my development.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
that it can be done.
yeah.
Do it, that I know I can do it. Yep. And it's almost like that mentorship aspect, and you can help them along the way to know this is what you need to do about financial aid. This is what you need to do about scholarships. This is what you need to do to go, look at the colleges. And then once you have that experience, you can let them know this is what you do, what you don't do when you go into college. It's all about time management. So just helping them along that journey that they're on as well.
That's right. And you just said something. Now, I'm a few years removed from I guess undergrad, but the financial aid process. I just heard that they made some revamps to FAFSA. So I don't know all the ins and outs, but that is a process, and I'm sure for a lot of people that are watching, listening, they can relate to trying to figure out this whole FAFSA process, financial aid, and if they didn't have anybody to really mentor them and show them, that could have been a stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yes.
So that's important. And so then the next thing, as we continue to move along here, and I just listened to your story, and I'm just like, wow, 2 master's degrees. So how did you go from one to now you're like, okay, I'm going back and getting a second master degree? What was that like?
Well, you want to hear my version or my husband's version?
I
digress on that one, but I just knew there was more inside of me that I wanted to accomplish. And the first, my master's degree was in management. And that particular time, I was assistant manager at Enterprise. So I was leading a team, and I know I wanted to be promoted. But at that particular time, a lot of people didn't look like me that was in those positions. And I felt at that particular time, hey, I may need to go get a degree that will help me, throughout my journey in this process, which I believe that it did. But as a woman, and then in a male-dominated industry that I was in, it was more so I saw that I didn't have the mentorship. I didn't have the backing as in to say, hey, this is what you can do to be successful in an organization. And when you're not valued somewhere, you leave. And at that particular time, I just knew it was more that I wanted to do from that training and facilitating and coaching perspective. And I love the arena of human services and helping individuals. So that's when I looked into, maybe a few years after that, with going into another master's degree in human services and counseling and helping and assisting individuals in their needs and just in life in general. So that's my version.
Okay. All right. So I guess we're gonna have to get the other version from your husband then.
Yes.
So, got it. So I'm listening to you, and so you talked about a master's in management, and so that's actually what I got my master's in. Got my master's in management with a concentration on organizational leadership and human resources, and so definitely understanding that piece. But you said something else that really struck my attention. As a woman in a male-dominated industry, and you went for your master's because you felt like there was more that was needed in order for you to continue to rise through the ranks there. But then ultimately you left because you didn't feel valued. So my question is, now that we're actually in Women's History Month, okay, and I'm listening to your story, why is Women's History Month significant to you?
It's very significant to me. I know that we have some phenomenal women that has went before me, but I have to look at it in a more intimate setting in reference to my great-grandparents and my grandparents, especially with my 2 great-grandmothers. They had entrepreneurship in their blood. They were not going to back down to anyone. I know with one of my particular great-grandmothers, heard stories about her where she married a man who was the master's son.
Wow.
And so when I look at that and see those pictures, it makes me think back to say, I wonder what sacrifices they had to overcome. And then when I look at my grandmothers, both of them going and cleaning other people's houses. And I used to go with them, and I'm looking to see the sacrifices that they had to leave their own families to go clean someone else's homes, and the dignity and the respect that those homeowners had for them. And then I look at my mother and my aunts, and like I said, that word sacrifice keeps coming up because I know that they passed the torch and the baton for me to break glass ceilings. And I have a daughter. So she looks at me, she sees me pushing and doing what I have to do in reference to breaking those barriers. And I know there's a lot of barriers that have been broken, especially with having the first, woman vice president. And to
Right.
see that, it makes me look back to say, wow, we did something, but we still got a long way to go.
Hmm.
And I just look at the different women that have made changes and strides for myself. But I look at it in more intimate setting to say the conversations I've had with my grandmothers or my aunts that has instilled in me today to say this has molded and shaped me to the person that I am. But what I'm going to do with what I have inside of me to help someone come up behind me. And so that's what I'm doing now with working with other generations that are coming to say this is what you have to be prepared for in the workforce. And as a woman of color or a man of color, this is what you have to do to make sure that you're prepared. We have to be prepared for what is to come.
That's right. That's right. Wow, that is. I'm listening to your story there, and your great grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole story, in and of itself. To marry the master's, son,
Mm-hmm.
um, in that time period. I mean, there's
Absolutely. I remember them when I was younger, and we used to go visit them, and I would tell my grandmother, my grandfather, I would sit beside him in the truck, and I'm like, "Who's that white man?" Sitting on the porch, and he's like, "That's my dad." But I didn't know anything behind it, but then the story. So I still have those photos, and I'm starting now a community conversations where it's intergenerational collaborations, and it's more so to say we have to have those individuals at the table so we can learn that wisdom. Because I don't have my grandparents anymore, but
Mhm.
we still need to learn that wisdom from that particular generation that came before us so
Right.
it can help us along the way. And that's what I see it as to what they instilled in me. What can I
Mhm.
instill in my brother and his generation that's coming along, especially my daughter as well.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's so powerful, to be able to do that. And I think that if we're not careful, what people tend to do when you have something that, um, just it was tough, right, to be able to go through from generation to generation. If we're not intentional, we don't tell those stories, and because we don't tell those stories, we miss out on a blessing of understanding that can come from that, so that we're getting better. And we certainly don't want to repeat things from the past as well. So there's so many lessons that we can learn on an interpersonal level when we understand history, when we take time and we look at those that are a little bit older, right? And you look at them and you don't realize, if you're not really, as a child especially, if you're not paying attention, that at some point they look like you. They were younger, as well. So when you get to that stage, it doesn't happen without there being a story there that people can really learn from. And so we need to value our elders and the perspectives that they bring. When they look back on their lives, I mean, I can look back on my life and say, oh my goodness, there's some things that I could have done differently. I should have done differently. I wouldn't make that decision again today if I had the opportunity. But it's important for us to be able to share those instances, that perspective, so that the next generation can move even further along. And so I hear you very clearly saying that you get that and you're working to bring that to the forefront. And so I just want to commend you,
Well, thank
for
you.
doing
I
that.
appreciate it. I do. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm listening here, and so you've talked about your master's degrees, you talked about your certification program, and so forth. And so now, with your business, Talk to me a little bit more about the social determinants of health. Okay, if somebody's listening right now, they haven't heard of that. What does that mean in your world?
Well, working in the healthcare industry, so I am with one part of my business, a life and health insurance agent. So I'm
Hmm.
basically the boots on the street, the grassroots to hear what these insecurities are, disparities are that my personal clients are dealing with. So when
Hmm.
you look at the social determinants of health, it's more so an aspect of how is it affecting the holistic of the person, their health. So when we look at their education, we can look at more so the healthcare aspect, food. It's different layers to it, but we want to make sure that we tackle those and overcome those barriers for individuals. So, for example, I work with the homeless shelter for women. And what we noticed was as a woman is our appearance. But with my if my health is not right, or if I don't look the part to go for this interview, I may need some type of assistance with dental or with vision. But if I don't have the adequate health care, then I'm not going to be able to help society with getting a job. So when you look at that, there's different layers to it. And so it's something that's nationally, but then we have to hit it home in my own locality where I live at, where
Right.
I see seniors or young adults that are looking to say, we live in an area where there's no grocery store, there's a food desert. So they're going to the convenience store that has items with high sodium, everything else preservatives, and they're not eating properly. So we have to look at those issues to say, how can we come together as a community to combat those situations? And it's looking at a community collaboration effort so we can combat those. So women or men can go to an interview and dress the part and have the clothes or the look to go to interview because they may not have those things. So with that social determinants of health, it's some layers to it. But the most that I see here in my area is the healthcare, the equity of that. I know right now we're dealing with the vaccines. That's a whole nother
Right.
conversation.
Right.
But looking at the different aspects from education, from transportation, all of those play a factor into that person's actual health. So just digging deeper into that aspect of it as well.
Got it. Got it. So, as you were discussing there, one of the things that I heard very clearly it was a slogan that I used to see on the back of people's bumpers on their cars, but it was "Think global, but act local." Okay,
Yeah.
so and I see you're doing that. You're doing that. So, what would you say to that slogan?
I do that every day. I make sure that when I'm thinking globally, act locally, that I have opportunities to go speak with CEOs one day, and I have opportunity to speak to the homeless the next. The conversation doesn't change. I'm just gathering the data, so when I do speak to the powers that be, to understand that this is what's going on in my backyard, what we're going to do about it. Then from a global perspective, they can see that this is other challenges and issues, not just here where I live, but it's in the state and it's in the nation. But like we said earlier, it's taking action and moving forward to say, what are we going to do about it? We can talk about it all day, but what policies and procedures and practices are we going to put in place to help those individuals?
Yeah. And so I know when I was in college, science wasn't necessarily my favorite subject, but I remember when I took I forget the name of the science class, but one of the concepts that really stood out to me was the ecological system or the ecosystem. And when we were talking about how things in nature are really interdependent. And what I hear you sharing is just you're looking at those connections to, yeah, we have global issues, but a lot of those global issues we can start to solve if we're doing things on a local level. And if we're looking at, well, what are some of the challenges that the people in the community are dealing with? I mean, education, food, you talk about the food deserts, transportation,
Yes.
those basic things so
Yes.
that people can actually contribute at a local level so that they can do more for themselves, right? And make those positive contributions to society. But when people don't have access to those resources, it just becomes a bigger issue, right? And you multiply that by not just having one person that's having that issue, but then you have a number of people that are having those issues. Then we start to see these different pockets that people are saying, well, why are we having these issues over here? Well, what are we doing about it? And so I hear advocacy as a part of your business as well.
Absolutely. And that's what I'd say, coin myself, one of my friends said, Camica, you are the voice and advocate for seniors and for the youth population.
Mm-hmm.
And more that I think about it and every day, I'm like, okay, Lord, what am I really placed on this earth to do? And that is to be an advocate for those individuals to have a voice for themselves and to understand what that process looks like, or to get to the particular person that can going to hear what is I have to say, but I'm speaking on behalf of someone else.
Right. So, you were in a management role. Okay. So just kind of going back for a second, you were in a management role and you felt like, okay, you just didn't feel valued. So you made a decision to leave. Now, did you know what you were going to be doing when you left that situation, or talk to us a little bit about that experience?
Great question. I think it was at that particular time, I was maybe top 3 in my district with Enterprise. And everyone kept saying, Who is this lady, Camica Credle? Like, who is she? Who is she? And the one thing is I kind of was in the shadow of my cousin because he was like the top branch manager and all of that.
Oh, okay.
So he basically was assisting me, like you said, mentoring me through everything. And my sales was there, everything based on the promotions in every interview, Josh, that I went in for. I was prepped, I was ready, looked the part, everything. And to hear the reason why I didn't get the position. And one thing that stood out to me was, well, we went with another candidate because he said that he was more organized. And I just looked at them and I said, okay, he was more organized. I actually worked with this individual day in and day out, and organization is not his forte.
Right.
But I had to look at it as, okay, am I being valued? Am I being appreciated? Am I being heard? I did feel in a belonging aspect, but it wasn't diversified. I didn't see really the equity. It was more so the good old boy. Oh, we know such and such, so we're going to promote him, but knowing that he had the management or the leadership skills. So that kind of made me think back to say, okay, Camica, what is it that's going to help you? If you feel that these are maybe some of your limitations, you need to make sure to work to your strengths. And I know that I was a leader and I was a manager, but I had to go elsewhere to make sure that what I had was basically going to be viewed as, okay, we need her on our team. And I know I'm not the only person that probably felt like that, but after you went in maybe 10 or 15 interviews and nothing happened, and my cousin, we had that conversation, he said, Camica, it's time for you probably to go.
Wow.
Look, go somewhere else to be feel appreciated. And he just felt like, I know you probably did good on your interview, but what happened? I just kept getting the same things. Oh, well, this person's been here. You know how it is with the recruiters.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, I grew this branch. I trained all these employees. They know everything. But what do you do in those situations? And yes, you want to go somewhere and be somewhere where you are valued and heard. And that's what I did. So I said, okay, let me go get my degrees and do what I have to do. And then, 4 or 5 years later, an entrepreneur. So I do what I want to do and run my business how I want to. Right.
Got it. But it sounds like certainly there were some lessons that you learned along the way, and being able to draw from those lessons. And as you just shared your story so vividly, in that way, I could see the picture that was being painted, and I can certainly empathize with that. I can relate, and in that sense, too. And so you're able to become even more so relatable. I think a lot of times people run away from their story, unfortunately. But because of those experiences, now when you talk to me or you talk to any number of other people, they relate to what it is that you're saying because you've had that experience there. And so now you're using that as a part of your platform when you're connecting with people. And I think that that's so important. So, thank you for, one, sharing that story, but, two, recognizing that you have I'm just going to say a gift, right? And whether people realize it or not, in a particular setting, that doesn't change the fact that you have a gift. That doesn't change the fact that you have these skills. It's like your cousin pointed out, sometimes you have to kind of pick up, go put that in a different situation so that it can really be appreciated. And now you can build off of it really exponentially, because it doesn't have to be a limitation for you being in a quote unquote box in this particular setting. So, my other question for you, Camica, is how does everything that you're doing now, because I've heard advocacy, one day you're speaking to CEOs, other day you're speaking to people that are just there within your community and trying to be a resource. So how does diversity, equity, and inclusion, how does all of that tie into your business or your outlook?
Great question. I just love the aspect of the DEI, and the belonging, because I see it and hear it and I live it every day.
Got it.
With the equity aspect of what we see now with a lot of the school districts that are virtual. So the equity for certain students that may not have access to internet or access to a computer. So yes, the school districts had to do what they had to do in order to get the particular items to them, but still they may be in an area where it may not work. And that has happened. I've heard those stories. Also the equity from the healthcare perspective, majority of my clients, yes, are seniors or young adults, but I hear it every day. And we're not going to get into the vaccine part, but it's just the process with that here in Virginia, what that looked like. And then I have to hear my own personal clients asking me or doing the research for them just to see where there's a location for them to go or getting the proper, information to make a decision on what they want to do. Not to pressure them left or right, however, but I just feel that it's the experiences. And I think, like you said, once we get out there and we're listening, and I believe that's one of the things that my gifting is to listen. And I think sometimes we like to tell people what to do versus not gathering all the facts and information.
Okay.
Hear what it is behind the words that they're saying to us, not just to say, oh, well, I don't have access to this, but it could be some underlying issues, the reason why they don't. So I do have, one aspect of my business, which is Credo Consulting, which is more so with training and development with organizations. And the other side of my business is the Credo Insurance Solutions Group. So more so I am working with still organizations, but their clientele from the healthcare perspective to educate, to inform the community and engage them in what their options are, or to more so educate organizations and communities to know these are the facts, this is the truth. You pick which one it is that you want, but it's being that voice in the community for them so they can make those sound decisions. And you hit it earlier, it's being a resource to them, because a lot of individuals don't have access to the resources when it comes to leadership training or when it comes to youth programs in certain areas. They should have the same equity when it comes to these particular programs. And then you said with DEI, with diversity, people think the first thing is race and gender. It's different dimensions to diversity, and it's making sure we look at all those, different dimensions to make sure that the organization have that. What do they feel like they're lacking, or help to fill those gaps? And that's what my organization helps to do, is help fill those gaps, and then also taking action and implementing what those particular subsets look like within the organization.
Got it. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, along those lines, and I really like how you showed what equity looks like in action, right? And you also addressed the digital divide that we're hearing more about, right? And we know that exists, and it became even more evident when school systems across the nation, really around the world, had to shift to a remote model or a hybrid model, where you had some students that were in schools and others that were joining class remotely. And I mean, some of those things you got to think about logistically. Well, how does this happen? How do we ensure success for everyone? If people don't have access to internet, if people don't have access to a computer, then how are they going to join, right? And then there's other things that are going on in their environment, whether it be in their home or just their community, that can also impact their ability to be able to learn. And so how do we make it equitable, for everyone? And so I think there's going to be some real opportunities in these next 3 to 5 years, especially because I think that now we see that model can be, something that can be utilized in a K through 12 setting. I think we may see more of that, but we got to close the gap. Otherwise, we're going to see some achievement issues continue to persist, and we don't want that. So I get it. Now, I know recently you announced, and this was a big deal, that you have been selected as a speaker for AIRS. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience of I guess, proposing and then being selected? What can you share about that?
So that opportunity was presented to me. I was actually in a networking group, a community networking group here, and one of the leads sent me an email, said, I think you may want to apply for a proposal. And I was like, okay, let me look and see. So I went to the website, looked through the different information and different topics. And like we said earlier, this is a season in the year for collaboration and for partnerships. And so I went through the different topics and I saw that it had DEI. And I said, I know I have some programming. I know right now is the actual opportune time to speak to these particular issues. And so went through, applied. It was very easy form to go through. And then more so to look, the summary, the objectives. And this basically time frame for their conference is for like C-suite level organizations. So AIRS is more so, they are internationally, so they're in Canada and also in the United States. And so hundreds and thousands of people will come to this virtual conference. And so we submitted within probably 2 weeks, received the email, congratulations, your proposal was accepted. And when I looked through all the other titles, our proposal was the only one out of about 35 that was on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh, wow.
So they right there that it's a huge need for organizations. And more so for our proposal, the terminology, I think a lot of times individuals, when they hear DEI, they think, check the box. This is going to be training. They already have that, mindset. But we want to talk about the cultural awareness and the dimensions of diversity and having a conversation, just like you said, around the table to make sure, okay, is there awareness around the table? Are there conversations around the table? And then once we leave, is there going to be transformation beyond, personally and professionally when we are at that table together? So just more so those objectives is for them to implement those ideas into their workforce, in their workplace, because that's what we want to do. It's not just a one and done. So hopefully from this particular opportunity, which I'm thankful for, that we can see transformational change, just if it takes one person or one department, but just looking forward to it. So I know it's going to be in May. So all the information, I think it's airs.org. Go to their website if you want to register. But I'm just excited just to see that email. It's like, okay, it's on. Like it's about to transform and change some lives. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on that. So, and
absolutely,
the co-presenter will be J. Lamont Harris, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. So he's doing some phenomenal things.
He is
nationally. So it's great just to, partner with like-minded individuals that have the same passion as you and that can complement and supplement what you have in place. So I'm excited about that.
That's right. So I'm gonna say this real quick. So as we are getting, we're getting ready to close up here, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been very informative, and it's just been a pleasure, speaking with you. So how can people get in contact with you, Camica?
Well, they can go to my website. It's www.camicacredle.com. Also, email me at camicacredle.com. And like I said, all the other contact information is on our website as well.
Perfect. And so I'm gonna throw one more question in, because there may be someone that's listening right now. Okay, and I'm gonna give you the last word. Okay. So there may be someone that's listening right now and they say, well, I see these RFPs, these requests for proposals that are out there, but I don't know if I should apply for it. what would you say to that person that's potentially sitting there on the fence and they haven't done that?
One, I would definitely say do your research. I believe within the organization and the individual to make sure that you have the capacity to um, for the proposal and to look at the proposal. And if you don't, then seek out, like I said, those other like-minded individuals and organizations that can help supplement or complement maybe programs or areas where you may be lacking per se. And just make sure that you're ready to do the work, because RFPs, depending on the time frame of them, you may see one today and it's due in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Make sure that you have some kind of evergreen proposal or some kind of aspect of your capability statement, different aspects of testimonials, what other organizations you have worked with before, because they need to see all of that information, and making sure that you're ready to look up the research for the actual RFP, because some you may not have the backing for within your organization. I know for myself, I'm SWAM certified, so it's small women and minority owned business here in Virginia. So
Right.
just look at that for the state of Virginia. So I had to make sure I did my due diligence to get my certification years ago. So that's one thing that I have that other organizations don't.
Got it.
So look at different things. So your certifications that you do or do not have. So start looking into see. It may not be an RFP that you want to apply to, but just try to see what those needs are in the community.
Okay.
Just be prepared.
Well, there you have it, Camica. This has been wonderful. Looking forward to continuing the conversation and continuing to work with you. But thank you for sharing your story and speaking to us with Champions Corner. So with that, we certainly look forward to following up with you again in the future, and wishing you and Jay all the best for your speaking engagement in May.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Josh.
Okay. All right. Well, talk to you soon. Thank you so much.